Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Cursed Amulet. The Isle of Wight had always been a tranquil place, with its cliffs overlooking the shimmering sea and ancient ruins nestled amidst sprawling greenery. But beneath its picturesque landscape, something ancient, something malevolent, lay buried waiting for the one who would dare to disturb it. Holly Arnold, a renowned archaeologist with a fierce curiosity and a reputation for unearthing forgotten relics, had heard rumors about an ancient Roman artifact hidden somewhere on the island. It was said to be older than anything previously discovered on the Isle of Wight, possibly even predating the Roman invasion. Locals warned of its cursed nature, tales passed down through generations of fishermen and farmers. They called it the Amulet of Unrest, an item believed to bring ruin to all who possessed it. Holly dismissed the superstitions as nothing more than folklore. She had seen and heard it all. Every excavation site brought its share of ghost stories and whispered warnings. But this time something felt different. As she delved deeper into the research, a chill settled over her, though she couldn't explain why. Her journey began in the small coastal village of Ventnor, where she had rented a cottage that overlooked the jagged cliffs. From there, Holly combed through the island's archives, meticulously piecing together old maps and journals. There was one journal in particular that piqued her interest, the writings of a Roman soldier named Lucius, who had been stationed on the island centuries ago. His final entry spoke of an amulet buried deep within the earth, which had been crafted by an ancient civilization long forgotten. The entry warned, "It is not for mortal hands." Despite the unease creeping into her mind, Holly couldn't resist. The promise of an extraordinary find was too tantalizing to ignore. Weeks passed, and Holly finally pinpointed the location described in the soldier's journal. The spot was an unremarkable clearing, tucked away from the well-trodden paths and sheltered by a dense thicket of trees. With her tools in hand, she dug for hours, the island's winds howling through the trees as if trying to warn her away. Her shovel struck something solid. Brushing away the dirt with trembling fingers, Holly uncovered a small stone box, its surface engraved with symbols she didn't recognize. When she opened it, her heart skipped a beat. Inside was the amulet, a gleaming, golden disc adorned with strange runes. It was beautiful but unsettling, its surface cold to the touch, even beneath the warmth of the afternoon sun. Suddenly the wind died. The birds that had been singing moments earlier were now silent. The only sound was her own breathing, growing faster as she held the amulet in her hand. A sharp, icy sensation shot through her fingers, but she couldn't let go. That night, back in her cottage, the nightmares began. She dreamt of the Roman soldier, Lucius, standing in the same clearing where she had found the amulet. His eyes were wide with terror, his body covered in blood, while shadowy figures circled him, whispering in an ancient language. Holly could feel their eyes on her too, as if they knew she had taken the cursed object. When she awoke, the room felt wrong. The air was thick, oppressive. Her bed creaked under an unseen weight, and for a moment she swore she could see a figure standing in the corner, its form barely discernible in the moonlight. But when she blinked, it was gone. Days turned into weeks, and Holly's life began to unravel. She became plagued by misfortune. Her equipment malfunctioned, her research papers mysteriously vanished, and her colleagues grew distant, as if sensing something was wrong with her. Worst of all, the nightmares persisted. Every night Lucius appeared, closer and closer, his bloodied hand reaching for her, his mouth moving but no sound coming out. One morning, as she wandered through Ventnor, exhausted and desperate for answers, an elderly woman stopped her in the street. Her face was gaunt, her eyes wide with fear as they locked onto Holly's. "You've taken it, haven't you?" "The amulet. You must put it back." Holly stared. "How do you? The amulet's cursed," the woman interrupted. "It has followed our people for centuries. Everyone who touches it, they die. You've seen him, haven't you? The soldier. He was the first to take it. But he was not the last. There have been others. You must return it before it claims you too." That evening, the sky had grown ominously dark, and the winds howled through the trees, just as they had the day she had unearthed the amulet. Clutching it in her hand, she walked towards the exact spot where she had found it, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, a whisper carried through the wind, indecipherable but unmistakably real. Holly froze, her breath catching in her throat. The ground beneath her seemed to shift, and she stumbled back, nearly dropping the amulet. But as she did, she realized something. The whispers weren't just voices, they were calling her name. Holly. Her blood ran cold as the shadows began to move around her, just like in her dreams. Figures emerged from the darkness, their forms twisted and indistinct, but one of them was unmistakable. Lucius. He stood just feet away, his eyes still wide with terror, his hand outstretched, reaching for the amulet. Panicking, Holly tried to flee, but her body wouldn't move. The amulet in her hand burned, its gold surface now searing against her skin. She screamed, but the wind drowned out her voice. Lucius stepped forward, his blood-stained hand now inches from hers. Holly cried, her voice cracking. Take it. I don't want it. With all her strength, she hurled the amulet back into the ground. The last thing she saw before the world went black was Lucius' face, a twisted mix of relief and sorrow. When Holly awoke, she was lying alone in the clearing. The amulet was gone, the ground undisturbed, as if it had never been there. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft light through the trees. But Holly knew the truth. The curse was not broken. It had simply moved on, waiting for the next to disturb its slumber. She left the Isle of Wight that day, vowing never to return. But as she boarded the ferry, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from the shore, something ancient and angry, still bound to the island, still waiting for the next unlucky soul to uncover the cursed amulet. Holly sat on the ferry, staring at the distant horizon as the Isle of Wight shrank behind her. Her heart raced, her pulse drumming in her ears, but the waters of the Solent felt like a temporary barrier between her and the nightmare she had escaped. She had returned the amulet, she had survived, yet something within her felt unfinished, unsettled. The ferry swayed gently, the low hum of the engine almost soothing. Passengers around her chatted, oblivious to the terror she had just endured. Holly clutched the armrests of her seat, trying to calm her shaking hands. Every now and then she swore she caught a glimpse of a shadow flickering in her peripheral vision, too fast to focus on, but there nonetheless. She told herself it was her mind playing tricks, the remnants of trauma. As the ferry neared the mainland, Holly's phone buzzed. A message from her colleague, Sir, appeared on the screen. Holly, we need to talk about your last find. Something's off. Call me. Holly hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about the amulet, not fully. Could Sarah have found out something on her own? A shiver ran down Holly's spine as she typed back. What did you find? She waited. Minutes ticked by. No reply. The ferry docked, and Holly disembarked, her steps uncertain. The fresh mainland air should have been a relief, but it wasn't. Instead, the feeling of unease clung to her, growing with every second. She made her way to her car, parked in the harbour lot, fumbling with her keys when she finally heard her phone buzz again. Sarah's message was short, but enough to freeze Holly in her tracks. The amulet, it's still in your possession, isn't it? Don't lie. Holly's breath caught in her throat. She fumbled with her bag, her hands trembling, searching through the contents as if Sarah's words had triggered something terrifyingly real. But it wasn't there. It couldn't be. Yet, at the very bottom of her bag, tucked beneath her notebooks and maps, her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. The amulet. Her pulse skyrocketed. She was sure, absolutely sure, that she had thrown it back into the ground. She had seen it vanish. But now it lay there, shimmering faintly in the fading daylight, as though mocking her. No. Holly whispered, her voice barely audible. She stuffed the amulet back into her bag, her mind racing. How could this be happening? Had she imagined burying it? Had she been hallucinating the whole time? As she sat frozen in her car, a familiar figure appeared in the distance. At first, it was just a silhouette standing on the edge of the pier. But as Holly squinted, the figure took shape. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, with hollow eyes and tattered Roman armor that clung to his decaying flesh. Lucius. His ghostly form drifted toward her, his mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes fixed on the bag that now concealed the cursed artifact. Holly's breath hitched, panic surging through her. She slammed the car doors shut, turned the key in the ignition, and sped out of the lot without looking back. As her car raced down the narrow coastal roads, she glanced into the rearview mirror. Lucius stood at the end of the pier, watching her leave, his form dissolving into the mist, but his presence felt closer than ever. Holly drove for hours far beyond the coastline into the countryside. She needed distance, any distance from the amulet. She couldn't go home. She couldn't call anyone for help, they would never believe her. She needed to figure out what was happening and had to break the curse once and for all. She pulled into a secluded inn late that night, its crooked sign barely visible in the dim light of the parking lot. The building was old, its stone walls weathered and covered in ivy. Holly checked in hastily, giving the clerk a strained smile. Her room was small, the bed creaking beneath her as she sat down, the wooden floorboards groaning like the voice of an ancient house that had seen too many winters. Exhausted, Holly let her head rest against the headboard. But the moment she closed her eyes, the nightmares resumed, only this time they were more vivid than ever. She found herself standing in the clearing once again, but now the ground beneath her feet was soft and wet like freshly turned earth. The sky above her was dark, swelling with black clouds. Lucius emerged from the trees, his hands outstretched, his voice finally breaking through the silence. "You cannot escape." Holly awoke with a start, gasping for breath. The room was freezing, though the heating had been on earlier. She looked around, her eyes darting to the corners, expecting to see Lucius or one of the shadowy figures from her dream. But there was nothing, only the quiet, suffocating emptiness of the room. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another message from Sarah, "You need to destroy it." Holly stared at the screen. Destroy it? How? The amulet was ancient, made of something stronger than just gold or stone. But Sarah was right, she had no other choice. With renewed resolve, Holly grabbed her bag and retrieved the amulet. Its cold surface gleamed under the dim light of the bedside lamp, the strange runes now glowing faintly, as if aware of what she intended to do. Holly searched for anything she could use, tools, fire, anything to shatter the object that had ruined her life. But nothing worked. She hammered at it with the base of a lamp, tried to scratch it with her keys, even contemplated burning it in the fireplace, but the amulet remained unscathed, as if protected by some invisible force. Desperation clawed at her. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the room. Holly froze. She hadn't heard anyone approaching. Slowly, she crept toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. Swallowing hard, Holly opened the door a crack, peering into the hallway. No one was there. Then she heard it, a whisper, soft and menacing, "You cannot destroy what you do not understand." She slammed the door shut, backing away, her eyes wide with fear. The amulet's glow intensified, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, swirling around her like a storm of voices from beyond. And in that moment, Holly realized the terrible truth. The amulet wasn't just cursed, it was alive. Bound by ancient, malevolent forces, it was more than a mere artifact. It was a conduit, a vessel for something far darker than she could have ever imagined. And it wasn't going to let her go. Not until it had claimed her soul. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.